This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com. The only place to be.
Criscuolo. So, of course, for those that follow the show consistently, always a pleasure. Welcome. For those that are new, and this is the first time you're seeing the show either on your podcast feed or it's the first time you found the PTB Wrestling Network, welcome. We have a blast here. We've been together for 14 years. How about that? My co-host and I, who I'll bring in a moment, this show is all about going to alternate universes where things in professional wrestling are a little different. Or maybe things are not different. I guess it depends on your point of view. And maybe alternate universes, things could be better. Or sadly, things could be worse. We don't try to make them worse. So last month in August, well, you know what? Let me bring in my guy and then we'll get into the whole story. So my co-host, of course, he is the Thunder from Down Under. He is Dave Hall. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, Scott. I'm doing well. Thank you. It's another lovely day down here in Australia. And thank you for joining us, everyone, once again on Through the Looking Glass. We really appreciate you coming on these journeys with us. And we do our best not to make them worse than what maybe real life was like. I think we've done reasonably well. I can't think of many that we've probably we've thought ended up being worse than reality. We've had a couple where we found it difficult to make some changes.
Yes.
But
I think
we've always come up with something positive.
Right. Yeah, no, we've done our best to always find the alternate universe better than maybe something here in the Prime universe. It's just, sometimes the journeys are a little longer and the ride has been a little bumpier than, say, others. But Dave, is always a pleasure. Thank you. And so this is our 49th episode, I think. I should have it in front of me.
Yeah, we're closing in.
We're coming up to 50 episodes. That I know for a fact. We're coming up on 50 episodes. Now, usually every episode is a standalone. We usually don't do multi-parts. We usually do one episode pertaining to something that is the theme for a certain month. Now, last month in August, we started a multi-part journey. I think it'll probably end up being 4 parts, where we are going to an alternate universe where the year in WWE Wrestling 2003 is better than the Prime universe. That is not hard, but obviously something that we couldn't do in one episode. So last month in July, we did the first 3 big shows of 2003. So we did the Royal Rumble, we did No Way Out, and we did WrestleMania 19. This month, our plan was to do Backlash, Judgment Day, and then the first ever brand-specific pay-per-view, which was Bad Blood, which was the Raw show. However, if you've been listening to our show for the duration, you do know that when sad things pop up, say obviously a wrestling death, we kind of throw an audible and we do an obit tribute journey. I think we've done 2 on our time here on the show, Dave. I know we did. Tell me if I'm wrong. We did, of course. We did Scott Hall. And I really enjoyed that one. That one was really good. We made Scott Hall a world champion. And we did I thought it was a great journey. We didn't just dump the belt on him. We actually did think about it. So check that episode out. We did that. I guess that was last year. He passed away. And then a few months ago, was it last year or a few months ago? No, it was a few months ago, right?
Yeah.
We did Sid.
Early this year. Yes, it was early this year.
Yeah, it was February, March, or maybe May. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
If you go back earlier this year, we did a great obit episode for Sid. Vicious, Justice, Psycho, whatever you want to call him. And we did a fantastic one there. We gave him a WWE 90 or WWF, I guess, 92 through 94 run if that was real life, Dave, if that was the Prime universe, boy, would that have been awesome. That was an awesome one we did. I'm very proud of that. But of course, if you follow wrestling, if you do, because you obviously do, because you're listening to the show, you obviously know that last month we lost probably one of the biggest of all time.
It was only
and
a few days after we recorded too, which was
I know it was. It
the
was that. I think
shocker.
it was the day. I think our show dropped. Our July show dropped the day before.
That's right.
Right in between the deaths of Ozzy and this guy, our show dropped. And then the night we recorded, I think, is when Malcolm Jamal Warner died. So that was absolutely insane. So, we're, of course, talking about the death of the legendary, the icon himself, the great Hulk Hogan, who died on July, I think it was 24th. It was 24th. And I actually did a very heartfelt, as part of that week's episode of the main event with Andrew Reich and Steve Willie. I did a very heartfelt eulogy within the show. He is a guy that meant the world to me. He is on my Mount Rushmore. He is the greatest sports entertainer of all time. Maybe he's like the 9th best wrestler of all time. I guess if you're going to break down work rate, that depends on your point of view or what you think makes money. Biggest money maker in the history of the business. That is undisputed. I mean, I guess you could mention guys like Stone Cold and John Cena, depending on the era of money, because obviously things are more expensive now than they were in 1985. But relatively speaking, he is probably one of the biggest money makers in the history of the business. And
I think if you adjusted for inflation, I don't think there would be any doubt that Hogan is probably the biggest money maker in the history of
I agree with you. I have to agree 100%. I've watched all the great tributes. I watched the one on WWE. TMZ did one that wasn't terrible. I guess it all depends on your point of view, whether you found it a little smarmy. I guess it depends on how you think, but be that as it may, I'm going to remember the guy who made me a wrestling fan. It's as simple as that. Without him, I'm not doing this. It's pretty simple. Yeah. And anybody who grew up in my era, I'm sorry, I don't get very matter-of-factly, Dave, and I could do this with you. If anybody says that they would have, growing up in my era, if Hulk Hogan had never existed, they would still be a wrestling fan, I think you're kidding yourself. It's just my opinion. Somebody like Sean Kidd might disagree with me, only because Sean grew up more in the Crockett era and he was a wrestling fan, but still, Crockett was elevated because of Ric Flair, because they had to counter Hulkamania in the WWF. That's just my opinion. Again, before we go on with what we're going to do tonight, Dave, I want you to have the floor. You're about my age, a little younger. What did he mean to you as a fan? As a fan,
look, I've got to agree with what you just said. That if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, I don't think I would have been a long-term fan. I've shared before, the first wrestling event, first thing I ever saw that was wrestling was WrestleMania 2. And while there was a couple of good matches on the show, the reality is that it was booked around Hogan and Bundy, and Hogan was this larger-than-life superhero. He was. He was charismatic. He could talk. He drew you in. He made what you were watching entertaining, and it drew me in the early days. Hogan drew me into the business, and it was because of Hogan that I became a fan. Now, as time went on, my allegiance shifted to different people, and there are guys that I prefer to watch over Hogan. And then eventually I started to struggle with Hogan as I got older with various things that went on. I'm sure a lot of people did, but it was Hogan that brought me in, and Hogan was the draw card for all those early years of my fandom, and I cannot deny it. WrestleMania 3, Hogan Andre was just a massive thing. So I agree with what you said there, and I also hold the opinion, like you said, there are people out there who are maybe fans of other companies before they got introduced to WWE, and that's fine. But I think the argument for those people would be made, I think if it wasn't for Hogan, I don't know that the business would be anywhere near what it is today. And I think a lot of those fans might not be fans of the business anymore, because it was Hogan that made it mainstream acceptable. It was Hogan that made it acceptable to be a wrestling fan at a time when people weren't wrestling fans. And then he transcends the business. Like, he transcended it all. You talk about, I mean, people I work with today, when they talk about, if they reference wrestling, they normally reference it in a mocking tone, but it's referenced as rock and roll wrestling. And they ask about Hulk Hogan. That's they're the two things, because that's what became mainstream. And Hogan changed the business. He changed it in a way that I don't think even the detractors of his in-ring ability cannot deny that he made it mainstream acceptable. He made it media acceptable. He made it, he made a name for himself outside of the business, and he opened doors for guys that wouldn't have been opened otherwise. And the Stone Colds, the Rocks, the John Cenas, the Roman Reigns, I don't think any of them would be around today and would have the name they have today without Hulk Hogan. That's just my opinion.
You're dead right. I mean, listen, we could sit here, and we're going to get to our project tonight. Don't worry. We could sit here, and I talked about this with Steve and Rish on the show, on Main Event as well, but we could sit here and debate things like, well, I mean, he had 5 moves, and the guy, his most athletic move was ear cupping, and all the other snarky comments that work rate nerds have to say. I'm being facetious, but we're going to talk tonight about the different aspects of Hogan that many people didn't see. Like, the guy did wrestle in the, well, now it's called the G1 Climax, but back in the early 80s, it was like the Grand Prix something or other back in the day in the early 80s in like All Japan, New Japan. And he wrestled in those tournaments. I think he won one. 83 maybe? 82, 83? Yep. He won one. And I know many people who have said that if you watch those matches, you're watching a different Hulk Hogan. And I finally, after years and years, figured out why Vince dummied him down to a few moves. And if you look at wrestling over the last, say, 10 years, you know why. It's very hard. You have to be a really top-flight athlete, a guy like a Ricky Steamboat or a Ric Flair or someone of that ilk in the 80s, to be able to wrestle 300 days a year at that level. And Hogan was 300 pounds and 6'8". He wasn't Ricky Steamboat, who was, Ricky Steamboat was probably 5'10", 5'11". He was probably 235, 240. Yeah. Hulk Hogan's not going to wrestle like Ricky Steamboat. He had to do with what he had. And Vince McMahon's philosophy was, I'm not going to have you get hurt in your prime because you're trying to do tope planchas and a bunch of other crap when you're wrestling 300 days a year. And in the 80s, come on, people, be real. Don't bullshit a bullshitter. No one was thinking like that in 1986. Oh my God, he doesn't wrestle like Tatsumi Fujinami. 80% of the wrestling audience did not think that way. I'm sorry. I'm just calling it as it is. We all were entertained because he vanquished the monster and made us happy in the end. And that made money. Okay? People watch Crockett, they thought differently. The Crockett philosophy was keep the heels with the belts and hook them into the next house show to see if Ric Flair will finally lose to Dusty Rhodes, or Arn Anderson will finally lose the TV title to Dustin Rhodes or Ricky Steamboat or whatever. The WWE, it was the other way around. Give the baby face the world title and let him vanquish the big guys. And then leave the IC belt and the tag belts for the heels and faces to have their athletic battles. Because you need to have your share of athletic workers on a roster. Of course you do. But in the 80s, fans were here to watch Hogan vanquish the monsters. The Andres, the Bundys, the Studs, the Earthquakes. You know, the one man gangs, or I was gonna say the Akims, but that's the same guy. You know, that's what his, and you know, and the psychological feuds like with Paul Orndorff, you know. So while we sit here and discuss, and we're going to discuss the legacy of arguably the greatest sports entertainer that ever lived, we're going to say that the landscapes varied based on your mileage. And again, I've talked with some of my dearest friends who did not grow up in WWF country. I did. Titan Towers was 25 minutes from my house when I was a kid. You know, guys like Sean Kidd, one of my favorites, of course, one of our biggest talents here in the quad, of course, co-starter of the Backbone. He grew up in Crockett country, so WWF was not really in his wheelhouse until the 90s. He's talked about it quite prevalently. Often. So the fact remains is whether you want to debate his work rate, give it a rest. Right? Seriously. Just give it a rest. Because let's be real. Okay? Real. And I know, Dave, I know you very, very well, and I know you are not the example of this by any stretch. Let's be real. No one was watching the WWF between 1984 and 1989 and went, oh my God, these Hogan matches. Why are they 7 minutes and not 35 minutes? My God, he's not wrestling like Jumbo Saruta or whatever the fuck. Like, nobody was thinking that way in 1986. Nobody. Okay? People were showing up to see him vanquish the heel because that's what we wanted when we were 12, 13, 14 years old. And if you were older than that, you still weren't thinking about, quote, work rate because nobody thought that way in the 80s. Nobody thought about that way until the Attitude Era, when the Attitude Era hardly had any real work rate because it was all about boobs and swearing, which, again, made money. It's very funny how all the things that made money during the biggest eras of wrestling, Dave, had nothing to do with actual matches. I think that's the best part. You know what I mean? You know. Right. But anyway, that's another debate for a completely other day. All right. So tonight,
but I want to agree. I want to agree with you on that. I want to agree with you on that. Like you're talking about, it wasn't his work rate that people were looking for. But the other thing we need to remember is the way the business was structured. It was an arena-based business in the mid to late 80s, even the early 80s. It was arena-based. You didn't see Hogan on TV. Normally, it was an interview, and maybe once every 6 months, you either got highlights from a TV from a house show, or you got him in a one-off match on TV. So you rarely saw him on TV. And in the terms of the house shows, the business model for the WWE, they were hitting towns about every 2 months. So you only saw Hogan, if you went every time, 6 times a year. And you can get away with the limited move set. You can get away with limiting it because Hogan, like you said, it's about the big guy beating the crap out of Hogan and you wanting him to make a comeback and win. And they worked out the formula that worked. They realized Hogan didn't need to go overboard. He could limit himself, like you said, and work within some restraints that would prolong his performances. Because we've got to remember, from essentially, well, Hogan through the 80s, with both before WWE and after, I can't think of him ever carrying injury. The guy we never got reports of him being hurt. He went and went and went. You go through the time from when he won the title in 84, he's there until 88. Then he goes and makes a movie, comes back, he's in the ring and he's going long term. Hogan didn't miss time with injury because he learned how to work within his physical capabilities. He learned what worked best, and he knew how to work the crowd. So he doesn't have to go chain wrestling when he can just do a couple of moves and the crowd go ballistic. Oh, well, if I do that every time, the crowd are with me. And that was how they made the Hogan train work. And it's really not until Hogan starts appearing on TV more often.
Mhm.
So when we're getting 4 pay-per-views a year and Hogan appearing on TV maybe 3 or 4 times in between, and then you've also got his house shows, all of a sudden people start going, oh, maybe he's not as good as maybe he's not as good anymore. Maybe I'm a little bit over Hogan by 1990, not because he was doing anything different, just because he was probably a little more overexposed. And then you get to the weekly Raw Nitro era that people really started to go, oh, hang on a sec, Hogan doesn't cut it anymore. And then Hogan had to change. But the lack of exposure is what worked to Hogan's favor.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head about that, Dave, because from 80, when he let's say when he first won the title, we'll talk about this when we start our work here. You know, from when he won the title in January of 84 until like WrestleMania 6, Hogan was only on pay-per-view and Saturday Night's Main Event. And if you were lucky and you lived in the Northeast, you got an MSG house show or a Boston Garden house show or a Spectrum house show. And a lot of times he may not even be at those. We would highlight the IC feud, Savage Steamboat. Or we'd highlight, the Dream Team and the British Bulldogs, or the tag titles, or another mid-card feud that had a ton of juice to it. But by 1988-89, when he was starting to show up more we started getting more pay-per-views and more Saturday Night's Main Events and more Cindy stuff, more promos on Superstars, Challenge, All-American. You're like, okay, I'm good. By the time WrestleMania, Ultimate Warrior, I think, tipped the scales on that because I had a friend who loved Ultimate Warrior and actually lost $10 on WrestleMania 6 because I was obviously a Hogan fan. And we all know about WrestleMania 9, and we're not going to beat that to the ground. We'll touch on it later, but then when he got to WCW, the red and yellow worked for about a year. But then when he constantly jobbed Vader out, okay, we're good. And I think deep down, a lot of WCW fans realized I'm looking at a WWF character that we have as a leftover. And then, of course, he turned heel, NWO, and we're on with. And then come back in the 2000s, we're going to get into that. That was just, I cry when I see a lot of stuff. Good and bad, mostly good. Okay, so.
Before we go on, I'm going to stop you there. Your microphone's sounding funny.
Funny, huh?
Yeah, it sounds like it's lost a lot of it's almost like it's not connected properly.
Oh, interesting. Let me fourth wall, everyone. Let's see. Okay, I just went backstage and fixed it. So we're all good. We're all good, everybody. All right, so here's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to do an alternate Hulk Hogan DVD. I know that 2 major DVDs came out by WWE in the DVD era. One was the anthology, which was all the big matches. And then one was then they did that Hulk Hogan story, which is kind of based on the book, which was very, very kayfabe. I enjoyed it. I thought the kayfabe was hilarious, but, be that as it may. And then they did the unreleased, which, by the way, the unreleased DVD, quote unquote, is on a full clip on the WWE Vault on YouTube. For those that don't know the DVDs, for someone like you, Dave, that obviously doesn't have the network or doesn't have Peacock, although I don't think it's even on Peacock. The full unreleased matches DVD is one full clip on the WWE Vault YouTube channel. So check it out.
Yes. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
So it's got some awesome stuff. And we are going to pull from some of those. But there's some other matches that I don't think are anywhere that I think need to be added because it's a good template of his legacy. And we are going to talk about some times where he made some professional missteps because they need to be mentioned. Nothing that's going to make you hate his guts. I mean, we're not going to get into we're also not going to get into the Terry Bollea stuff tonight. The tape and Bubba and other things. We're not here for that. If you want to find a podcast to do that, be my guest. I'm a better man than you. So just saying. But anyway,
essentially we're doing the Legacy of Hulk Hogan DVD. We're sort of what would a DVD be like if it was done by an independent source and it really looked to cover all aspects of his career. That's what I think we're looking to do today. So it's not a WWE, it's not a WWE showpiece. It's not a company toe the company line. It's about looking at who he was and choosing some of those matches. Now, some of them will be on other DVDs. Some of them may be on multiple DVDs. But we're looking at trying to pull together just a pool of matches that would fit on a 3-disc DVD that really sort of encompasses everything to do with Hulk Hogan and the legacy that he leaves us in the ring. That's what our aim is today. So just something a little bit different, but a little bit fun. And I think then within that, that's going to open up some doors because we'll be talking about what are some of the stories we would go on. But then I think at the back end of that, we're going to look at, well, what are some of the things we didn't get? What maybe was some of those moments, what are some of the matches that we never got that maybe we should have got? And that's where our traditional rebooking element might come into it.
Yeah, and we'll do that in obviously another part as well. Who was a guy that you would have wanted him to wrestle that we never saw for one reason or another? All right. So let's begin. Through the Looking Glass presents the Ultimate Hulk Hogan Legacy DVD. No Vince tainting, no Bischoff tainting, no, well, we have to have, this. No. It's going to be a mega snapshot of everything he ever did, for better or for worse, in terms of in-ring creative product. Now, the first match I have, and I put it on our little doc here, Dave, I think we need to because to see the early vestiges of what he was going to become, I think we need to have his WWF debut. So we would go to Madison Square Garden, or not, we wouldn't go to Madison Square Garden. I'm sorry. It was, I think it was All American, or it was a TV taping. And it was November 17th, 1979. And it was a match between Hogan and Henry Valdez, some jobber, or Harry Valdez. I think it's Harry. It's obviously a TV taping, and it was his WWF debut, November of 1979. Freddie Blassie was his manager, and we obviously see the pieces of what would be the future Hulkster. So, what do you think? I think that's a good appetizer.
Yeah, I think that's a good. Yeah, it's good to start there to get that moment in at the early stages of his career. So certainly our first appearance on WWF television would be absolutely vital.
Mm-hmm. Okay, why don't we can alternate if you want. Why don't, even if we go out of order, meaning if you pick a match now and then the next one I pick goes chronologically before your pick, I'm cool with that too. So we could just bounce back and forth. What do you have?
Well, I think another match that when you're looking at Hogan, obviously we've got this concept. We've got to look at the legacy of Hogan. Everyone sort of focuses on the fact that Hogan's career began in '84, or he began in AWA. But we know he had a career before that. And I stumbled onto something recently. Now, whether it's this match or whether you do something else, but Hogan did a tour. Hogan did the run of the territories in the late 70s and early 80s. He did the run of the territories. And I don't know if you saw it crop up on YouTube the other day, but someone's posted, it was posted on YouTube as rare 8mm Hulk Hogan footage, but it's sometime in like 79, 80. It's Memphis, and it's Hogan teaming with Jerry the King Lawler and his then kayfabe brother Eddie Boulder, aka Brutus Beefcake, against Ron Bass, Pete Austin, and Danny Davis. And I just thought, if you're going to do a legacy, we really should have something. You would want something from outside of WWF, something from like Memphis, because he also had matches against Jerry Lawler. Now, whatever one you choose, I think you want something in that time period, from when he's somewhere else. And I think Hogan and Lawler in Memphis, or Hogan teaming with Lawler in Memphis, would be a good little addition for the backstory of his career, coming through the territories and working the different regions, developing his character and his persona.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Because it gave him a chance to kind of expand himself a little bit, continue growing as a character, and particularly in an area that maybe smaller audiences saw of him, and which would benefit Vince or at the time Vince Sr., because obviously back then there wasn't a lot of cable, so nobody, nothing could get ruined. Obviously things are very different back then. Okay. The next match I have is one that's probably on a collection, but I think is very important because it was his first opportunity in a big setting. Obviously, when fans think of Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant, they think of course, WrestleMania 3, and we'll most definitely talk about that match. But it is forgotten that 7 years earlier, Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant wrestled in front of just as big a crowd as they did at the Pontiac Silverdome. And that was in the summer of 1980 at Showdown at Shea, which was a show that took place in the summer of 1980. I got to look up the date. The summer of 1980 at Shea Stadium, home of my New York Mets. And Hogan and Andre wrestled on that card. Now, they were on the undercard. The main event of that show was the hot feud between Bruno Sammartino and Larry Zbyszko that was in a steel cage. That was also a rare opportunity to see two guys hold all three belts, because I believe it was on that night, for at least a night, Bob Backlund, the World Wrestling Federation champion, and Pedro Morales, the Intercontinental champion, won the tag titles, I think, from the Samoans. I feel like that might be a little too early.
No, that's true. They beat the Samoans.
They beat the Samoans. So in a weird thing, Vince Sr. had two guys with all the belts. But I think I think the tag titles were given back like a week later with some kind of weird, mumbo jumbo. So, but Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant wrestled at Showdown at Shea in the summer of 1980. And I think that was Hogan's first moment on a big stage, wrestling the Boss, who was still the Boss at the time. And he'd still be the Boss for a while. But I think it's a match that Hogan was the heel. He worked heel. And Andre was obviously the big, beloved babyface. But I think that's a match that you need to see Hogan's first moment on a big stage in front of, 60,000. Because Shea, for Mets games, seated, I think, 52. And then if you count floor seats, it was probably wasn't the whole Shea. Maybe it was, because it was in the middle of the ballpark. So you probably could have got 60,000. I don't know what the exact crowd number was. I'll have to take a look. Let me check the history of WWE.com and take a look. Let's see. Was it in July or August? Something tells me it was in August. Let's see. There it was. August 9th, 1980. Okay, I maybe overstated a little bit. August 9th, 1980. 36,295 for this. Probably because people sitting in the upper deck probably couldn't see. So they probably didn't have upper deck seats. Again, the main event was Bruno and Larry in a steel cage. Right before that was Andre and Hogan. Apparently, Hogan kicked out at 2, and the ref didn't notice. I don't remember that, but you know what? I'm wrong. I made a mistake. My apologies. Backlund and Pedro did beat the Wild Samoans, but Pedro was not the Intercontinental Champion. My bad.
But Backlund was WWE. Yeah, but Backlund was WWF champion.
He was definitely WWF champion, but Pedro was not Intercontinental champion. Ken Patera was, because on that show he wrestled Tony Atlas. So my bad.
Yeah.
Um, anyway,
this is the time period where they had the rule that you couldn't hold 2 championships at once, and that's why Backlund and Pedro had to give up the tag titles back to
right,
Samoan.
exactly, because Backlund couldn't hold both, and it makes sense. So yeah, August 9th, 1980. I don't know if that show is full anywhere. I think I've seen Hogan Andre and Bruno and Larry. I think those are on specific things.
They've been on DVDs, yeah. They've been on DVD releases.
Yeah, but I don't think the whole show is anywhere. I might be wrong, but I don't think the whole show's anywhere. So
I've never seen it. So
yeah, I don't think I've seen it either. But yeah, so that's mine. That's my next one. Hogan and Andre from Showdown at Shea, August 9th, 1980.
Yeah, and I think that really those 3 matches I think really give you when you, like you said, you're doing a legacy DVD, you're looking at his early career. That really gives you a good background to his early career. It's
I agree.
It's he's done a run in the territories. He debuted on WWF television, and then that showdown, that Shea Stadium match was really the high point, the biggest match he had in that first run. Because it's quite clear he never really. I was listening to the Hogan tribute on the North South network.
Mm-hmm.
That JT did with a couple of the boys, and it was noted. I can't remember who he did it with, but it was noted that he never really had a series of matches against Bob Backlund. He did have a couple of matches here and there, but he never had a match against Backlund at MSG. And didn't really have the round the loop run. He just had a couple of one-offs here and there. So he never had that top line match against Bob Backlund for the championship. So this was the Shea Stadium match was the pinnacle of that first run. So I think this encompasses the first run. That would be your first element of the story of Hogan. So I agree with those matches. So I think your next step then is to look at, well, where did Hogan go from there? And really the bridge here, this is the bridge of Rocky 3. This is the bridge of he was picked to go and selected to appear as Thunder Lips in Rocky 3.
Correct.
So I'm going to throw it out there. You make a deal with Sylvester Stallone, and you have Hulk Hogan. You have Rocky Balboa versus Thunder Lips from Rocky 3.
I am totally 100% in favor of you doing that. Absolutely. The Ultimate Man versus the Ultimate Meatball. It's awesome. Oh, Dave, you're a genius. I agree. 100%.
Yeah, so that's going to be on our DVD because we know what it is. We know it's a movie. It's a clip from a movie, but it fits the legacy because that made Hulk Hogan bigger than just about anyone else in the business.
Yep.
Without Rocky 3, I don't think you get Hulkamania because they have nothing. He doesn't have the public opinion and the public attention. So that's where we get that. That's what really took him to the next level. So the fourth match will be Thunder Lips versus Rocky Balboa from Rocky 3. And that match, well, I think timeline-wise, Rocky 3 is set, in about 1982?
The movie came out in 82.
Yeah.
82.
Yeah.
Which is my favorite.
The no actual date is given in the match, but yeah, it's around about 1982 is when the concept of the match takes place.
Yeah, that's when the movie came out. So you could put spring of 82. That's fair enough. All right. So I have 2 matches I have on my mind, but I'll do one now and then I'll do my next one after you pick. I think if we need to talk about what happened to him after he left WWF. Now, for those that may not know, Vince McMahon Sr. fired Hulk Hogan because he took the gig as Thunder Lips. Because, Vince Sr. thought, you're not a movie star, you're a wrestler. You're paid to wrestle. Stop doing other things. Now, of course, his son was probably thinking it to himself, my God, are you stupid? Dad, what are you doing? But, you know, the old man was a promoter. And to Vince Sr.'s credit, that's how they thought back then. Now, it's kind of amazing that Vern Gagne had the edge in this because Vern did a movie in the 70s. Of course, he had himself in it. You know, was pretty much the reason. But Vern was already looking ahead about movies. Now, speaking of the AWA, that is where, I mean, he might have tipped his toe in Memphis even in the 80s, but we definitely know that he ended up going to the AWA, and that's my next match because this was the match I think where everyone realized, wow, this guy, as much as the ending sucked, and Greg Diener and I always make fun of that evil, dastardly heel Stanley Blackburn. We make fun of him almost monthly on Wrestle Tracks. I think we need to put the match between Hogan and Nick Bockwinkel from Super Sunday in the spring of 1983. Even though it ended with the worst flim-flam, dusty finish shenanigans you've ever seen, that match is a snapshot of what you were going to see for the rest of the decade in terms of him having crowds in the palm of his hand. Again, the match is good, actually. Bockwinkel's a stud. So, you know, in terms of Bockwinkel was the kind of guy that could wrestle it like Hulk Hogan or like Ric Flair that could wrestle a donut and get 3 stars out of it. That match was loaded with heat. Crowd was on their feet. Bockwinkel fell over the top rope. Ref didn't see it. Hogan ended up, and then Bockwinkel got back in the ring. Hogan got the pin. And of course, as Greg Diener and I always say, ruthless, nasty heel Stanley Blackburn came out and overturned it because Vern was trying to think like Crockett, where, hey, we're going to keep booking matches with Hogan and see if he can keep chasing. Unfortunately, this was an instance you probably didn't want to do that. You probably should have struck while the iron was hot and had Hogan win the belt there. And he never did. And by the end of the year, he was pissed off and he left for the WWF. And then, of course, Vern wanted half his Japan money. We're going to talk about Japan in a minute. So that was another reason he left the AWA. But I think you have to put Hogan versus Nick Bockwinkel for the AWA world title at Super Sunday in the spring of 1983. I think you have to do that because that match is where crowds started to gather to him and become emotionally invested in him, Dave.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. You've got to have that time period with Nick Bockwinkel is a vital part of the Hogan story. That AWA run is a clear example of the missteps that they took, the AWA took, as you said, and it sets up the journey of Hogan to be picked back up by WWE and brought back in as the top dog. So I agree. I think that match has got to be in there. So okay. All right. So I think the other element that we should touch base on if we're talking about his time before we hit the top, and we've sort of referenced it already, is Hogan also did regular tours of Japan.
Yes.
And we've spoken, and we mentioned it earlier in the episode. Hogan had a reputation that we talked about Hogan's in-ring reputation and being maybe a lazy worker, just doing what was needed. But Hogan had a different reputation in Japan. It said that he was a very solid worker, worked a good style for Japan, well received. They had him back on multiple occasions. It's not like he just did one tour and was done. He did regular tours of Japan for years until essentially he became exclusive to the WWE. So that puts us in the situation where I think you need to highlight his something from Japan. And to me, there's a big moment before he came to the WWF. And that is in June 1983, Hulk Hogan beat Japanese legend Antonio Inoki in the final of the IWGP tournament. Hulk Hogan was the first IWGP champion in Japan. And I think that match that needs to be on this card, because on this DVD, because you've got several elements. You've got him working a Japanese style. You've got him working against a Japanese legend who admittedly was at the back end of his career, but certainly in 1983 could still go in the ring. And you've got another element of what he could do outside of the WWF. So I think that it hits the nail on all marks. Hogan and Antonio Inoki, 1983.
That was actually the match I was going to pick next as well. Thank you for hitting the nail. Thank you for saying it yourself, so I didn't have to add it. We can add another match. Now, to give people a frame of reference, for you younger wrestling fans that think of the G1 Climax in its current, or that tournament in its current format, which is of course now the G1 Climax, and you have all these Zack Sabre Jr. and all these guys, and past guys like Okada and Kenny and all these guys, work rate marvels. These were the guys in the 1983 IWGP, which by the way stands for International Wrestling Grand Prix, in case you didn't know that. The tournament ran from May 6th to June 2nd, 1983. And it was because of this tournament that Hogan ultimately left the AWA. So here were the guys. Here were the guys. This is what makes this. I'm just to make a point. I'll go from bottom to top. They did the same thing. They had matches and points just like it is now. Enrique Vera, 4 points. Otto Wanz, 5 points. Okay, for those that know wrestling, Otto Wanz is not Kenny Omega. Okay, Kanek, all right, Kanek, 5 points. Akira Maeda, good wrestler, 14 points. Rusher Kimura, 21 points. Killer Khan, yes, the Killer Khan that broke Andre's ankle, that Killer Khan, 24 points. Big John Studd, 25 points. Andre the Giant, 35 points. Antonio Inoki, 36 points. And Hulk Hogan, 37 points. So as Dave mentioned, Hogan and Inoki wrestled in the final. So you have to remember that in those days, the IWGP tournament, or what again would become the G1 Climax, had nothing to do with, 24 guys wrestling for 47 minutes and blowing the roof off the Tokyo Dome, Dave Meltzer. It was not that kind of tournament. They brought in, of course, you know the term, gaijins, foreigners, to make it a major attraction. It probably wasn't until the early 90s that the tournament became more of a flippy-floppy work rate kind of thing. But in those days, in the 80s, it was about wrestlers coming in from overseas to enter, to mix up with the Japanese stars to make money. What a concept, Dave. Make money. And that's where that came from. So for those of you who are like, Hulk Hogan wrestled in the G1, no, he wasn't wrestling guys like Kenny, a guy of the level of Kenny Omega or Zack Sabre Jr. No, he's not doing that. No, because the tournament wasn't sculpted like that in the 90s or in the 80s. It was more about bringing in gaijins out of towners, I guess, for lack of a better term, to make money because they're special attractions. That's why Andre was in the tournament. Funny, Andre supposedly was undefeated, yet he really wasn't, because he didn't win this tournament. So he finished third in points. So that's pretty funny.
And you look at who's in that tournament. Like there are a couple of big name Japanese guys that you mentioned. You mentioned, obviously we said Antonio Inoki, Akira Maeda you mentioned was in it. But you also look at the other guys. Like Andre was a regular in Japan, one of the biggest draws in the world at the time. Otto Wanz, as much as we might scoff at that name even today, Otto Wanz in 1982-83 was a big name in Europe. He was the number one guy in Europe, and he even got an AWA world title run in I think 83 or 84. So he was a big international name. So this is a stacked tournament from a
It is
1983 international draw perspective. Even Killer Khan was a big name in '83. So these are the top guys around the world at the time in this tournament. It was a prestigious event.
It was, and so it was, and again, I'm not obviously cheapening. Wrestlers now, saying that they don't make money now. That wasn't my intent. What I was saying was, you younger fans that have only been a fan since the 2000s are probably wondering, Hulk Hogan in the G1 Climax? Ha! You jest. Well, that tournament in 1983 was not like the tournament it is now. Obviously, Japan changed a little bit as well over time. In any event, my next pick is a match that we have to have on here because it was it, and that is, of course, the one that made us ultimately the one that not only made me a fan of wrestling, although I was already a fan of wrestling since June of the previous year, June of '83, and the match that got me to love wrestling in general was the match between Jimmy Snuka and Mike Gibson Rocco in October of '83 at MSG, when, of course, Snuka dived off the cage. But I didn't have a favorite guy. I just liked wrestling. I was 10 years old. I just thought wrestling was cool. I didn't find a favorite guy until this match. And obviously, we don't have to get into the whole rigmarole because everybody knows the match. January 23rd, 1984, Madison Square Garden. Hulk Hogan, Iron Sheik. Hogan wins his first WWF title. The best part about that show, quickly, is not only, obviously, is it Hogan's coming out party as the guy that's going to be the guy, but it was the first time that the MSG had the look that everyone would know as the MSG look. Even from a month earlier, from December of '83, when Sheik won the title from Bob Backlund, the Garden had that gray kind of dingy look. The following month, the lights were brighter. We had the cool MSG mic flag with the bunch of mics that Howard used. The ring had the red, white, and blue ropes. Everything just looked brighter and fresher and new. And then you had Hulk Hogan as the new World Wrestling Federation champion. The switch flipped on that night, Dave, and the WWF that we all knew and loved started on that night.
Yep. No, absolutely. It's a must. This is the moment. Like, if there is one moment, if you're looking at the moments in a career, this is the moment Hulkamania was truly born. This is the moment that the WWF changed the business forever. Hogan beating Sheik at MSG, it just transcends everything in the business, and it's a must. It's a must on the match on any legacy DVD for Hogan, because we're talking about we're talking about a match that really anointed him as the top guy in the business. And so it's got to be on there. I agree with you. And it also launches it begins the launch of the next stage of his career. If we're talking about a legacy DVD, we've sort of spoken about pre-WWF, the early 80s, the run in AWA and all that. Now you're really into Hogan and the WWF in the late 80s. That's the next segment of his career, and the Hogan Sheik match is the launching point for it.
Correct.
It's got to be on there. And in fact, on the DVD, I would probably even show highlights of his first couple of television appearances before it. Not the whole match, but just when you're doing they do the talk over segment, talk about how he came to the company, because actually a fun little match that I wouldn't have it on there, but is before, like, his first mainstream TV appearance on Championship Wrestling is him teaming with Bob Backlund. It was supposed to be against the Samoans, but it ends up being against Mr. Fuji and Tiger Chung Lee, because the Samoans backed out of the match and didn't want to be in it. And the week before that, the Samoans were wrestling Bob Backlund, and he gets beaten up and goes to the back and brings Hogan out. So you've got these little things that set the whole stage for Hogan's return. So you want to have a couple of highlights of that, but you're not going to show the whole match. This is the match that you've got to see. So yes, we're launching. We're into the time. We're in the legacy of Hogan. We're into his title reign now. let's be clear. We could have so many matches on this, and we need to be careful we don't overload our DVD. So we're going to I think we need to keep it to some of the key moments to the key points of his career from a legacy point of view. In my mind, the next key element of his career is his feud with Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Yes.
Because that is where we stepped it up a notch. He'd been fighting, he beat Sheik, and then he was sort of fighting Orndorff and Dr. D and Big John Studd and like the heel of the month at the house show circuit. And then he got into the feud with Roddy Piper. It was the first time he had an ongoing personal feud in the company. Yep. And it elevated him, it elevated Roddy, and it elevated the company. And I think the to launch into Piper Hogan, I think it needs to be the war to settle the score on MTV. That to me would be what you would want to have on this DVD.
Uh-huh.
That's February 18th, 1985. War to settle the score, Hulk Hogan versus Roddy Piper.
You're reading my mind, Dave. You are absolutely. I don't think we've ever been, and we're always usually in pretty good symmetry, but I don't think we've ever been in this good a symmetry as we are tonight, because you have pulled two matches literally out of my brain, which was the Japan match and this match. This was my next match, because if you watch that match, Piper comes out with the NYPD Emerald Pipe Band and the bagpipers and the drums. That's awesome. Comes out with the Hogan shirt on. I mean, what a let's take a moment, Dave, because we of course lost him years ago, and we would have definitely done, had we been doing the show back then, we would have definitely done a Piper episode. You know that. He was just such a great heel. What a great heel. And that night, I mean, Orndorff, T, the cops are everywhere. I mean, the cops are circling. I mean, Dave, it was chaos. I mean, it was that building that night at MSG was that, using the term nuclear, that was nuclear that night in that building. I mean, that was insane. And I'm not going to actually put it on the list because I think it's one that everybody could find on other stuff. So I am not putting WrestleMania 1 on here. Everybody knows the match. We're going to assume in alternate universes you could watch the WrestleMania 1 match somewhere else. So we're not going to put Hogan and T against Piper and Orndorff because you can get that elsewhere. And that more doesn't have to do with Hogan than it does WrestleMania. Trust me, we'll have our share of WrestleMania. So we'll have our share.
I think I agree with you on that. I think this Hogan Piper match encapsulates the feud between Hogan and Piper. WrestleMania 1, the main event there is more about the atmosphere and the development of WrestleMania, because Piper's attention is more drawn to Mr. T in that main event, and the hatred and the anger is more focused at Mr. T than it is at Hogan. So I think it's a good idea that we'll leave that WrestleMania 1 main event off the DVD. We don't need it.
No, we don't need it. A match that I'm going to put on now, and I'm pretty sure I may have watched this with some of my alternate viewing. I don't think this match is on the Peacock, but you could find it. But it's going to be on our disc, so you can watch it here. I just need to find it. Is it? I don't think it's this. Let's see. Nope, that's not it. It's June. We are going to go to Madison Square Garden because this is a match that actually is much more entertaining than it had any business being. And I remember doing this match with JR when we were doing on the Place We podcast, and we were doing the MSG shows. We were doing the 85. Let's see. It's right here. We're going to go to June 21st, 1985. Hulk Hogan defends the WWF title against the magnificent Morocco
Mm.
inside of a steel cage. Hogan and Morocco would end up having a 3-month feud. They wrestled in April, the April MSG show right after WrestleMania 1, then again in May, and then the capper was here in June inside of a steel cage. And I very much remember JR and I really loving this match. And again, just a good example of Hogan owning MSG and vanquishing a very, in 1985, Morocco was still a very respectable heel. He had only lost the IC belt the year before to Tito Santana. So he was still a very reputable upper mid-card heel. And he beat Hogan, I think, by countout in April. Then Hogan won by DQ in May, but Morocco beat him up after. And then they had the blow-off here in June of 85 inside of a steel cage. The match is very entertaining. So if you could find it, well, it's going to be on our DVD here. It's a really good match. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Dave, but it is a really, really good match. And I think it's a good indicator of, A, how Hogan could amp up his violence meter if need be. And again, I just think it's a great example of Hogan's having the MSG crowd in the palm of his hand.
Yeah, look, the three Morocco matches have such a great reputation. I haven't seen all three of them. I've seen a couple of them, but they have such a great reputation. And I think it showed Hogan's versatility at a time when he was starting to get, we come back to this idea of the monster of the month that Hogan sort of got labeled with. And again, after Piper, it went down that track. All of a sudden, he gets into this series with Morocco, who's not. He's a bit bigger than some of the other guy, like the Pipers and the Dr. D's in terms of his body girth. And he just brought a different psych element to it and to the match, and it worked. They had great chemistry, and I think that feud shows a different element of Hogan's work in the WWE, especially in those early days. So I like that pick. I think it's a really good pick.
Thank you. I think it's a good match too. All right, what do you have next?
All right. Well, I'm gonna change track a little bit. So, like I said, there's so many matches, and there's so much from that early run that could be put in, and there's guys that he faces later. I mean, you could put anything from his, in a similar vein to the Morocco series. You could put matches against Randy Savage in there. I want to jump to something different, because another element that came in the mid part of his run with the company was we started to utilize television to start to tell the stories more. So wrestling had always been go to the arena, see the big match. And what do? You might have an interview or an attack happen on television to set up the main event at the next house show. That was essentially how the business ran. And then, Hogan had dominated the company for a while, and then they looked at they made some changes, and they created a little story to change things up for Hogan a little bit. And that story happened in mid-1986. And the story was a couple of weeks build. You had some segments that you would highlight in the build-up, the flower shop and some off-screen segments, all building to a tag team match on television. One of the rare times Hogan appeared on Championship Wrestling, and the date was the 12th of July, 1986, and it's Hulk Hogan and Paul Orndorff. Sorry, it's the week after. It's Hulk Hogan, not 7th, the 14th of 1986. Hulk Hogan, 19th of July, 1986. Hulk Hogan and Paul Orndorff versus Big John Studd and King Kong Bundy on Championship Wrestling, the match in which Paul Orndorff turns on Hulk Hogan.
Okay.
To me, I think, is a really good example of the storytelling element of Hulk Hogan's career. They drew a story up into the match, and then they used the match to have the turn. And it wasn't normally done that way for Hogan. And Piper turns on his friend in the match, and joins Heenan and the Heenan family to launch that feud. And I think that becomes it's not a bad little short 3-4 minute match that allows you just to see the full storytelling element. And so I'm going to throw that onto our DVD because I think it brings a different picture of who Hulk Hogan was and how they used him.
I think that's awesome. We talked about the psychology and the emotion of that feud where you didn't call me back and everybody laughed at it, but it was a great way to dictate that feud. I was going to put, but I've changed my mind. I was going to put their match in Toronto at the big event, when Orndorff would come out to Real American to piss everybody off, which I thought was pretty funny. I love that that turn, and of course they would feud throughout the end of the year. I have decided my next match, I'm going to be a little favored here because this was the first time I ever saw Hulk Hogan live. So I'm going to add it because it was kind of the capper of the real capper of this feud. And that is from the air date was January 3rd, 1987. The date that it taped was December 14th, 1986 at the Hartford Civic Center, which was about half an hour from my house. Saturday night's main event, Hulk Hogan defending the World Wrestling Federation title against Paul Orndorff inside of a steel cage. That's the first time I ever saw Hulk Hogan live. And I was on cloud nine. And of course, my brother, my brother Chris, not my oldest brother, my brother right older than me, he loved the heels. He hated Hogan when I was a kid. He loved bad guys. So if you remember the match, Dave, when both guys hit the floor simultaneously, of course, my brother was the only one of the 21,000 at the Civic Center that night that thought Orndorff's feet hit the floor first, and Danny Davis was right. Of course, this is before they thought of Danny Davis being a heel. It was great, and my brother had soda cups thrown at him and pretzel pieces, and my brother said to me, "Why are you letting these people throw stuff at you?" And he said to me, "Because that's heat." I love my brother using kayfabe terms in my family, he goes, "That's heat." Now I would have that heat 14 years later in the same building pertaining to Triple H, but that's a different episode. That match is amazing. And I put it on this list for personal reasons because it was the first time I ever saw him live. So that's why I have it there.
Well, you come back to thinking in sync today because I wanted that match on the DVD
Good.
as well. So I'm so glad you picked that because that was the option. I was thinking that was going to be my pick, and I thought, no, I want that tag team match on there before it.
Right.
I really wanted that tag team match on, and so I think that tells the story. There's the story, that the turn and then the blow off. I think that becomes a great little picture for the legacy DVD of who Hogan was and how they told those stories. And you could have a whole segment on the DVD devoted to the telling of the story. And you could have guys talk about what was happening backstage, maybe why they did the turn and how it worked and the run that they had and that how this was the big blow off. So I think that would be a fantastic addition to the DVD. So look, I think this leads us to the inevitable. I honestly think the next match that goes on the DVD is the inevitable one. If the first inevitable match is the Iron Sheik Madison Square Garden Championship victory, then the second inevitable match is Hogan Andre at WrestleMania 3. Yeah, you can't not include it because of everything that it encompasses about Hogan and his legacy and who Hogan was, who Andre was, what WrestleMania was. It all comes together in this match, and you can't not have it on the show because it was the biggest drawing match at that time in history.
when I look back, and again, first of all, Dave, you're 1,000% right. Go back to, again, for those that haven't listened, go back to the last episode of the of Place to Be Nation's main event when I did this. Also, if you go to our YouTube channel, the PTB Wrestling Network YouTube channel, and there's this my number one, my guy, Callum McDougall, actually took my piece on Hogan and made it a separate clip. So the whole episode is great. But if you just want to listen to my, I guess, eulogy, if you go to our YouTube channel, Callum put up just that. It's like, I don't know, 12 minutes. It's nothing crazy. But I talked about, now, this was the first pay-per-view, Dave, that I watched in my house. I did not watch WrestleMania 1 live. I ended up renting that tape about whenever it came out, like a month later. WrestleMania 2, I watched on closed circuit at my home arena, the New Haven Coliseum. My dad took me, and I watched, the screens. But that was the first time I went to a live thing of any wrestling capacity. So WrestleMania 3, March 29th, 1987, I was in the living room with my brother and my dad. And of all the things that I've ever watched or attended or enjoyed, sports or otherwise, with my father, that for me will be the snapshot of my childhood. When it comes to remembering my dad, because two things people knew about me as a kid, my two loves in terms of hobbies: wrestling and Star Wars. Those are my two things.
Good
and thank you. And thank you, because a lot of my sports teams went up and down back then. But sitting on my living room floor and seeing the lights go out. First of all, that show, I know the show goes up and down, but I don't give a shit. And Savage Steamboat is still my favorite match of all time. That'll never change. Sitting in my living room, Dave, and watching that show with my dad and my brother. And my brother really thought Andre was going to win. He really did. And my brother was 6 years older than me and already knew it wasn't kayfabe, but he really thought Andre was going to win. And I remember, and I watched it on YouTube recently. It was on the WWE. I don't know if it was on the Vault. It might have been on the Vault, but I always look back to the one thing Jesse said. Jesse, who, by the way, if you think about it, Dave, you want to talk about how sad, of everyone involved in that match, he's the only one left still alive.
Yeah.
Think of that. We do not have Hogan. We don't have Andre. We don't have Bobby. We don't have Euchre. We don't have Gorilla.
And we don't have
and you can even say we don't have Mean Gene.
Well, you don't have
you don't have
the referee.
Joey Marella.
Joey Marella passed away too. Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't have, and you can even add we don't have Mean Gene. Sucks. But Jesse, who always knew what to say and when to say it, the one line that will always stick in my mind: this is the biggest match in the history of professional wrestling.
Yeah.
He wasn't wrong. He's still not wrong.
No.
So
absolutely.
You have to put it on here. You have to. Yeah. No ifs, ands, or buts. You have to. Because that is it. That's the match that validated him as the man. And apparently, according to Vince, now Vince said this, not Hogan. It was actually on that TMZ doc. He said, according to Vince, after the match, in the ring, when they were close together, Hogan said, "Thank you, boss." And Andre said to him, now you're the boss.
Wow.
I'm going to believe that.
Yep.
Why would Vince make that up? I mean, I know Vince has some weird things going on in his brain, but I'm going to believe that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dave, I can't fault you for that one. So
no, absolutely. And the other thing, like telling that story, that what you've just shared there about Vince talking about what Andre did after the match. It allows you, I think it opens the door to talk about some other stories, because I think one of the things I would love our Legacy DVD to do is just highlight the fact that Hulk Hogan has spent a lot of his life sharing tall tales about different aspects of his career and his life. And many of those tall tales actually happen to focus around this Andre the Giant match. Yes. Where Hogan talks about Andre being like 700 or 800 pounds and says that he didn't even know going out to the ring who was going to win the match, which we all know is BS. Didn't know if Andre was going to play ball, which we know is BS, and claiming that when he slammed Andre, he broke every muscle in his back, and we all know that's BS as well. So I think it would be a great opportunity to start just highlighting, because you can use the backdrop of that match then to be Hogan has sort of said these things in his life, but they really don't measure up to the truth. And Hogan Andre was the biggest match of all time. Why would you need to make stories up about it when it was as big as it was?
Yeah, I agree. You are right about that. I think sometimes he paintbrushed it a little bit, but everybody did that. But yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It adds to the allure. I don't mind being lied to about Hogan, about Andre weighing 985 pounds. We chuckled at him like, we got you, Hulk. We got you. And we move on because we weren't all stupid. It's fine.
Yeah.
My next match, we're going to shoot ahead a little bit because, the rest of 87 was fine. 88 obviously took a lot of time off to go do No Holds Barred. So the next match, and our DVD is going to have a vignette culminating to this match because it's probably one of the greatest, if not, and many people consider it the greatest WrestleMania build next to the one we just talked about, because Hogan Andre leading up to WrestleMania 3 is absolutely amazing. This might be number 2. Of course, we're going to go to Atlantic City. The Mega Powers explode. Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, WrestleMania 5. The match is great.
Yeah.
It might be the first match on television where you can go, wow, that match was like 4.5 stars, if we're going to do that. But the drama, the tension, whether or not you believed Hogan was the heel or not, which I've always said maybe he was, because that was a difficult storyline to try to manipulate where Hogan looked like the good guy, because he really didn't. And I don't know if that was because you just couldn't figure it out or whatever, but be that as it may, that match in Atlantic City is absolutely amazing. Savage was already a star, and that match put him in that level, even though he lost. Pissed my brother off to no end. But I put that match on here because it was the culmination of arguably one of the greatest WrestleMania builds of all time. Once again, a great example of storytelling in the 80s that led you. And this is where we started to get Hogan on TV a lot. This is where, Dave, where you were saying earlier, maybe this is kind of where the overexposure might have begun, was in 1989. Because we saw a lot of it with the Summertime and Zeus and all that kind of stuff. But I think this match has to be on here because I think it's a good example of Hogan actually putting somebody over, even though Savage and him always had a very up and down relationship for various weird reasons. These two guys on that night knew what to do and how to do it and put on a stellar performance in Atlantic City.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
It absolutely has to be on there as well. It's one of those matches that just sticks out as a highlight of his career. It was a great, like you said, if not the greatest, then only the second. Like if it's not the greatest, it's certainly one of the 3 greatest storylines in the company's history. The Mega Powers storyline. Yep. So you need to have the culmination of that storyline on there. And you said that we would lead it in with clips of the story from the very beginning in 1987 all the way through to the breakup and all that. You would have that as, again, this is the story to the long-term story of Hogan Savage is just up there as all-time memorable and made for something that you can't miss, and therefore you can't miss it on this DVD. It's got to be on there, and it's a great match. It's a good match. It's a great match, and it allows us to see Savage at his peak as well as an in-ring performer. So I think this is a great must-see. So, all right. Well, I'm gonna throw something different in as our next match, but I'm going to backdrop it because you just referenced 1988. Hogan dropped the title to go and make a movie, and this was the start of something different. This was the start of crossing the boundary and going to Hollywood. It was something that became an ongoing thing through his career. He made No Holds Barred, then he went and made other films, and throughout the rest of his career we get periods of time where he leaves to make movies. So I think there would be an element where part of the story of the legacy of Hogan is focusing on the fact that he made movies, and you would talk about that and include you probably reference some of the movies that he made, and you probably talk to some of the actors that he was in the movies with. And just as an aside, I wanted to do this as part of our episode today. So I'm just going to throw it out there. We're talking about the alternate universe. This isn't my match, by the way, but we're talking about the alternate universe and the world alternate universe. Sure. Unfortunately, Hulk Hogan never had the greatest reputation as an actor. Never really made it as an actor in Hollywood. Right. But what if he did? What if he developed a reputation where he was seen like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is, as a good actor who can do good movies and could be someone to bring in? I'm wondering, what are some of the mainstream movie roles that were around in the late 80s and the 90s that perhaps, what if Hulk Hogan, if he was a better actor, could have been cast in that role? Like, could you imagine Hulk Hogan as the Terminator? Instead of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Hulk Hogan got the opportunity to be the Terminator, because if he was a bigger actor, he certainly would fit the size and the sort of the image of the Terminator. And he wouldn't have to talk too much. So, what are some other ideas that you could see? What are some other, if Hulk Hogan, if we had the what if Hulk Hogan made it, he was a genuine bona fide star, what are some of the movies that we might have seen him in?
Well, it's funny you say that. I was just thinking about that while you mentioned Terminator, because the other movie I thought he'd have been good in, I wouldn't have put him in as the star though, but I would have put him in the ensemble with Arnold in Predator. Maybe instead of Jesse.
Oh yes,
maybe Hogan would have said, "I ain't got time to bleed,"
or even in Carl Weathers' role, the friend of Arnie.
Yeah. I could have seen him in Predator, or I'm looking on my shelf right now. I'm looking at all of my action stuff. Maybe The Running Man. He wouldn't have been the Rockies because he was already in those. Maybe Chuck Norris could have used him as a bad guy in something. Maybe one of the Missing in Actions. Let me think. I'm looking around here. Maybe he could have been. Instead of Sam Elliott, I could see him like as one of Patrick Swayze's sidekicks in Roadhouse, things like that. I feel like he could have fit in some of those roles. Him as the Terminator would have been interesting, because you're right, he didn't talk much.
What if he was? I can't remember the role, but what if he took the character role that Bruce Willis had in Armageddon, going up to the moon and drilling into the asteroid and getting ready to blow that apart.
That would have been fascinating. Yeah, right? That would have been great. Or maybe instead of Robert Patrick, maybe he's the villain in T2 Terminator, T2 Judgment Day.
Oh yeah, yes.
Maybe he'd have been the bad guy. You know?
The alternate, the other Terminator, the bad Terminator. Yeah, that would have been a bit more of a matchup too for
I
Arnie there.
I find that utterly fascinating. I think that would have been amazing. So, all right, I like that. I think there would have been a lot of good spots for that instead of Mr. Nanny.
I've got the ultimate one though. I've got the ultimate one for you.
Okay.
Because if Hogan was able to make it as an actor, and he was around when this movie was made, if he was a big enough star, then you would have to seriously have considered, as the development of the Marvel Cinematic Universe came about, you would have to seriously have considered Hulk Hogan as the Incredible Hulk in MCU.
That would have been pretty awesome. That actually would have been pretty awesome. I like that. I like that actually.
All good fun. And look, we'd love to know. We'd love pop some of your own thoughts if you've got what would be a good movie. If Hulk Hogan made it as an actor, what are some of the movie roles that we might have seen him in over the years? And pop it into the comments. With the where this episode has dropped on socials, we'd love to see it. But I'm going to bring it back to my match now, because where I was going, we talk about the movie roles. I want to showcase a match that ties into his movie career, but it's not the one that you might be thinking of. I want to also have a match that, to me, incorporates my favorite tag team of all time.
Oh boy!
And I'm going to put what is essentially the main event of Survivor Series 1989: Hulk Hogan, Demolition, and Jake the Snake Roberts. What were probably the three biggest names in 1989 in the company, the three biggest babyface roles in the company, against Zeus, Ted DiBiase, and the Powers of Pain. More for the just element of the Zeus, the crossover, and the movie element, but also because I want to get my favorite tag team of all time onto the DVD. So
okay,
that's what I'm going to add. The Survivor Series match at 1989: Hogan, Jake Roberts, and Demolition against Zeus, DiBiase, and the Powers of Pain. I thought about doing the SummerSlam match with Savage and Beefcake, which is a better match, but I just like the idea of getting Jake the Snake and Demolition onto the DVD.
Well, Demolition was still the biggest babyface tag team at the time. I don't fault you for that, Dave. As a matter of fact, I think every hot babyface was on that team except for Warrior, who of course was captaining his own team. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Sure. A lot of people get frustrated at that match because everybody gets disqualified. That might be a little bit of the whole Hogan kind of creative maneuvering, like, all these guys get DQ'd.
I think it'd be a good way. It actually opened the door to allow some conversations on how Hogan was presented and protected at times in the ring. Mm-hmm. You could get a Bruce Pritchard on to talk about how there would be times where the way the story was being told, you don't want Hogan to lose, and the way you've drawn this match together, you've got to have cheap eliminations. You've got to have cheap outcomes to protect the character or to protect the image of who Hulk Hogan was. And that's part of his legacy. That's clearly part of his legacy. And I don't think this match is an example of him playing political games. I think this is an example of, we've put this match together. We want Hogan to win, but we don't necessarily want him to pin everyone. How do we get some of these guys out of the match and protect Hogan at the same time? So I think that that allows some interesting conversations on the DVD.
I agree. All right. So my next match, I was actually going to do a match earlier in the year, but I'm going to skip it. Because you kind of already encapsulated the Zeus thing. I was going to put the match from Saturday Night's Main Event from the previous May between Hogan and the Big Boss Man, that cage match, because that cage match is actually very good. But that was the intro to Zeus, the move me. And that build, I got to say, that build to SummerSlam 89 is pretty damn great, because SummerSlam 89 is one of my favorite shows of all time. So, all right, another gimme match. One where you could clearly say that he did the right thing. Some people say maybe it wasn't for the right guy, but I think you have to have it on here because it showed at that moment that maybe it was Hogan's time to step away and let others do, kind of take the mantle while he took a break and kind of recharged his batteries. Of course, I'm talking about the Ultimate Challenge, Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior from WrestleMania 6. The match is amazing. They practiced the crap out of it. Obviously, the great moment, the hush going over the crowd when he handed him the belt and everything. It was amazing. And Hogan, the visual that I'll never forget. Obviously, Warrior standing on the turnbuckles, holding up the two belts with his orange tights. But Hogan on the little carrier thing, the carriage thing or whatever, the platform, in the dark, being wheeled off, kind of with a look like, can't believe that's not me. But I think you have to have it there because it's an amazing match, indicative of the landscape in 1990. Maybe Hogan started to realize that I'm being a little overexposed, and I'm going to take some time off. And of course, that summer he'd get into the whole earthquake thing. Oh my God! If I heard on the eulogies after his death that version of Real American, the na, 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 you remember that, right, Dave? Na, 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 wah, 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 wah. And the fucking cards and the kids crying and the crucifix hanging in the empty locker, and oh my God, a little boy from Warwick, Rhode Island, who would eventually be one half of the PICs, was crying in the summer of 1990. Dave Hall. So I think you have to put
tissue for you.
Exactly. Yes. So I think you have to have the Ultimate Challenge from WrestleMania 6 on here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, again, you're talking about, if you were to list like what are the 5 greatest Hogan matches of all time, that's going to be in that 5. Depending on where you want to rank things, that's going to be one of them. It's the culmination of that era of the company. It's if Hogan and Andre was the pinnacle of Hogan as on the rise, Hogan Ultimate Warrior is sort of the culmination of the Hogan era as WWF champion in that time frame. Yes, he held the belt at other times after that, but really that WrestleMania 6 match sort of brings, it's almost like a bookend. It closes us off with, here's the end of that era. And from that moment, the company was no longer just about Hogan. After that moment, it was the WWF on its own didn't, sort of stood out without necessarily having Hogan, or would try to show that they didn't need Hogan anymore. So
right.
that match is, and like you said, it's one of the few times that Hogan laid down clean.
Yep.
And you've got to have it. And it allows you to tell the stories. That Hogan didn't lose very often, but here's an example where he did do business and he did it the right way. For a guy who was accused of not doing business the right way many times, here's an example where he did. And so yeah, that match is another must have on the DVD.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, now I think we get into an interesting element, because I think where we go after Hogan Warrior is a bit of an awkward time period, because there are occasional matches that are good. You obviously, like I said, you can't have everything at every time and every moment. And I'm going to put it, and really what happens after 1990, sort of 91, 92, it's not the rose is off. The glow is off Hogan. Even when he gets his wins, it's not as well received. There's then the is he holding on too long? Is he being pushed when he shouldn't have? Should things have happened? And there are some matches that aren't so good that are out there. And I'm happy for you to put a couple of matches maybe before this. But I think one of the things Hogan, like we talked about Hogan Warrior, that there was criticism that he didn't do business the right way. I think you've got to have the opposite end of the scale on this. where we have an element where Hogan didn't do business the right way in our face. And that is, I think you need to have the Hulk Hogan Yokozuna match from WrestleMania 9. I think that's got to be on there as well, because the stepping in, the taking the limelight when it really was no longer his time, and the story that flows out of that, I think would need to be told, because it's the complete opposite end of what happened with the Warrior. So whereas we might still put a match or two between them, I think that Hogan and Yokozuna at WrestleMania 9 needs to be on this DVD as well.
It does. I mean, it is a big moment in history. Fortunately, not one that you want to completely emphasize or glow as a big moment in Hogan's history, but it did happen. And at the time, we did all kind of go, "Oh my God, this is amazing," because we didn't realize what was going to happen after the fact. That Hogan barely was on TV for the next 3 months, and then dropped the belt at King of the Ring, and then we never saw him again. And then he was gone, and then we would end up seeing him somewhere else. So yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that match has to be on there. It's not the proudest moment, but I think you have to have it on there for purposes of marking time to probably the end of the Federation era. I consider the end of the Federation era 92, but I think you realize by King of the Ring 93, when he drops the belt back to Yokozuna, that it was time for him to move on and find greener pastures. And that is what my next match is going to be. And that I think this match has to be on there because it's the match that actually outsold, for the first time, I think ever, the match that helped WCW outsell a WWF pay-per-view for the first time ever. And that is, of course, his debut match in WCW, Hogan and Flair for the WCW title at Bash at the Beach 1994. I think you have to have it there. It marks time. It's weird. Hogan is considerably smaller. He's down to about, maybe 295 at this point, maybe even 300. He's probably about 295, 290. And it's the match we should have gotten 2 years earlier at WrestleMania 8 that we didn't get. And it began the long run of Hogan as WCW champion, where the WCW fans, after probably, I don't know, another 6 or 8 months, realized, okay, now we're just borrowing stuff from another company, and then we'll obviously move on from there. But I think this match needs to be here because it was a big moment to have Hogan on another promotion's pay-per-view at that time.
Oh, absolutely. And the story behind his arrival becomes part of that legacy as well, because between that Yokozuna match and the Ric Flair at Bash of the Beach, you can tell the story of Hogan doing Thunder in Paradise, like getting the television role and doing that television role. And you can talk about his being brought to WCW, and you can sort of tell the story. You could get Eric Bischoff and Ric Flair on to talk about how they enticed him to the company, and essentially you tell the story of how the contract worked. You can talk. Bischoff can tell how Hogan got a portion of each pay-per-view he was on, and he had a limited schedule and had creative control. Like, you can tell all those elements create the backdrop to his arrival. And so it creates not just the match in itself, which was, like you said, the big match we never got. Although we've done that. We rebooked that on a previous episode of this show. And you can go back and listen to that later on. On one of our WrestleMania what ifs, we looked at we sort of did some of the main events we didn't get at WrestleMania, so you can go back and listen to that. But yeah, you get the backstory, you can tell the story, and then you show the match. Hogan and Flair at sort of really, I mean, Flair at pretty much the last meaningful run that he had at his peak as a wrestler before he sort of things started to change for him in ring. This was the back end of that amazing 93, 94 run he had in ring, where sort of had that one last final run and he put Hogan over. It just tells that story and marks the change of direction for Hogan in his career. So, yeah, I agree with that. So, all right. Well, I'm going to throw in something a little different as our next match. With, again, coming back to the legacy element of Hogan, the other when Hogan came to WCW, there is another criticism that followed him. And that was Hogan arrived and he got jobs for his friends and he wanted to make sure his friends were pushed over the long-term established company guys that WCW had, the good in-ring workers like the Ric Flairs, the Steve Austins, the Ricky Steamboats, all these guys who've been in the company for years and great in-ring reputations. And all of a sudden, Hogan brings in his friends. Jobs for the boys, I guess is what you can call it. And that lays the backdrop for our next match. It's not a good match, but it is an example of jobs for the boys. And that is Hulk Hogan versus the Butcher at Starrcade 94. It is a terrible match.
It is absolutely horrible.
But if you are talking about the legacy of Hogan in WCW and what his perceived image was, this is the epitome of it. He got his friends into the company, and not only did he get jobs for his friends, he made sure they were pushed to the point that we got a match that we should never have had. No one wanted to see it. Beefcake was not a good in-ring worker at this point. Hadn't been since his injury, since the face got busted up. Should never have occurred, but it did. And so that is the legacy of Hogan. He got friends jobs and put them in prominent positions. And the Starrcade 94 match is the best example of that.
I hope this doesn't preclude people in the alternate universe from buying the set, but oh god, no, you make like you said, you make a great point, Dave. We have to. It is an example of how WCW got kind of mangled into got kind of mangled to what happened to the company when Hogan started to bring in Beefcake and Honky and Duggan and all these other guys. It probably led to some serious issues with WCW and some of the guys, of course, because you're talking about Starrcade. This is like WrestleMania, and this is the best you could do. Yeah, not the best, but one that had to be done. It had to be done. All right. Yeah. So now we've got to do this match. This is obviously the match that flipped the script and gave us the next chapter of his legacy, Hulk Hogan's legacy. And that is, of course, Daytona Beach, July 7th, 1996. Bash at the Beach. Hulk Hogan becomes the bad guy. And we get him leg dropping Savage, joining the NWO. So technically the match was Sting, Lex Luger, and Randy Savage against the Outsiders at Bash at the Beach 96. And I think that it changed everything for WCW, obviously, put them on the map, and put them kind of on a bigger map, and then began that in essence began them. Even though Nitro started the previous September, this officially really got the Monday Night War going, and would give us some great television on both sides for the next probably 3 years. So I think you have to put this match here. You have to.
Yeah. Look, I agree. And not so much for the match. This is you want this for the post-match interview. Like,
absolutely.
That's the key of that match. And I mean, depending on how you set it, you might just choose to have the tail end of the match and the post-match interview as what you're highlighting, whether you choose to put the whole match on or not. But I agree, you need that interview more than anything, because that's where it turned. The Hogan, no longer say your prayers, take your vitamins, but Hogan, you can all shove it. You can all go to hell. It's now, I'm NWO for life. And so that interview launched the new era of WCW. So yes, the interview needs to be on there, and the interview makes context when you have the match. And so I agree that while it doesn't feature Hogan as prominently, it certainly needs to be there.
Yeah, it does.
And I'm going to take it the next step, because I think the match that does need to be on there, that does feature Hogan, is just a couple of months later. It's the Fall Brawl 1996 match, War Games, where it's Team NWO, Hogan, Nash, Hall, and the fake Sting versus Sting, Luger, Flair, and Arn. Because to me, this is really Hogan hitting his straps as the heel. The NWO run really hitting top gear, getting a move on, and we really get to see Hogan as the heel for the not so much for the first time since Bash at the Beach, but really in a prominent, decent match for the first time, and that we're going to show. So I think that War Games match is a natural flow on from the Bash at the Beach match.
I agree with you. Yeah, no, absolutely. It establishes these guys as a legit faction that transcends, just within the WCW world, and the T-shirts and the marketing and the following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order. And it just, it brought into focus the fact that Hogan has reinvented himself and brought WCW to the forefront. So, hey, if red and yellow Hogan's not going to work, maybe this will. And, whether we hear the stories about him being a little skeptical about it at Bash at the Beach, I mean, I get it. But this is a big deal. This is a big deal. So I agree with you. Next match for me, we go back to, unfortunately, one of the darker sides of the Hogan creative monopoly. Yep. Although you could argue that who knows who's right or who's wrong here, because it was the one moment that WCW could have won the war for good. And that is, of course, Hulk Hogan versus Sting for the WCW title at Starrcade 1997. Yeah. Because that was laid out for them. Yeah, Montreal happened. WWF was in the toilet creatively, in the media, in the fans' eyes. This was the one shot that Eric Bischoff had to step on Vince's throat and win the war. And they blew it. And a month later, Mike Tyson shows up at the Royal Rumble, and that's that.
And all because I don't like his tan, brother.
Yeah. Supposedly, Hogan and Bischoff thought that Sting looked out of shape, that he was a little pale, and I'm thinking, but he wears black and white makeup, and he wears black and white. Who cares how tan he is? That's not the point. But the Bret Hart thing and the fake pin and just the whole big hot garbage at the end there was another example of Hogan's missteps when he would maybe go too far in overplaying his hand creatively. Whether he wanted to put Sting over or not, it didn't matter. It was just like Andre at 10 years earlier at WrestleMania 3. You just do the right thing and do it clean and do it right. Could you imagine? They did the fake 3 count for WrestleMania 3, but everyone knew that Hogan kicked out. And that was kind of what was supposed to happen here, but unfortunately it didn't. So I think that match has to be on there because it was the moment where WCW may have permanently turned the tide to win the Monday Night War, and they blew it. And 3 months later, Mike Tyson's at WrestleMania 14, and WWF rebounded and won the war. So they had their chance, and they blew it. Whether Hogan realized that or not, I don't know. But
yeah, I absolutely agree with you. It's got to be on there. You've got the long-term story. Again, that you can highlight the fact they told this long-term story. It was great storytelling until the climax, and they bombed the climax. And yeah, you got Hulk Hogan's political maneuvering. You got backstage stories. You've got an in-ring match that doesn't really cut it because of what happened.
Right.
All the surrounding elements. It's a memorable match for all the wrong reasons, and therefore it's something. It's a reflection, like we're saying. This all comes back to the legacy of Hulk Hogan. That match is a true reflection of the legacy of Hulk Hogan. The sad part of the legacy, which is the political maneuvers, doesn't always bring it in the ring. Utilizing his creative control at a time when it shouldn't have been used, and the long-term impact on the company was noticeable from within a month. So yeah, well, I'm going to put out there as we're nearing the end of our DVD, I'm going to put out there as a match that is, I guess, possibly the only time Hogan did things the right way in WCW. The only time Hogan didn't turn things around with his creative control and ruin what was going on. And what was probably Hogan's last great moment in WCW. And that is his match against Goldberg at the Georgia Dome on the July 6th Nitro 1998. That's when Goldberg beats him for the title. That has to be on there. If we talk about the Ultimate Warrior match and the Andre match, to me, this sits in that realm. It was everything it needed to be in the moment. It wasn't too long. Hogan helped make Goldberg look like an absolute killer, which he needed to be. Goldberg dominates, pins Hogan cleanly to a massive reaction, and Goldberg, the star of Goldberg was born. Unfortunately, WCW didn't capitalize on it properly, but you said that you were just saying that sort of Hogan's Sting was the last great opportunity, like where WCW could have won the war. I would argue that they got a second chance. The Hogan Goldberg match was the second chance. They laid a foundation that if they had capitalized on it properly, could have resulted in them resuming the top of the ratings and possibly regenerating the momentum and getting a rollback on to maybe cause the damage back.
Mm-hmm.
But they never did. They never did. But in the moment, what a moment. That is one of the greatest television wrestling moments of all time, and you've got to have it on the DVD.
Yep, I agree 100%. Yeah, I mean, I think, he did the right thing. And you know what? All the years after, he never, I don't know if he ever asked, but he never wanted it back. He definitely wanted it back from Ultimate Warrior, and we all know what happened, few months later at Halloween Havoc, but that's different. We're not. I'm sorry, Dave. That's not going on this disc. I don't care. That is not going on this disc.
No, that's too bad.
That's too lowbrow. But I agree with you. I think you have to put this on here.
It's interesting that you say. It's interesting that you say he never wanted it back, because the backstage stories were that part of the reason, like he accepted it, I'll lose to Goldberg, was that I'll give Goldberg his first loss down the track, which was supposed to be that Starcade time period where Nash got the win.
Oh, I never knew. I never saw that.
Oh, that's part of the backstory of the match. Is Hogan was basically presented with, we're going to do the match, and Hogan said, I'll put Goldberg over, but I want to be the one who ends Goldberg's streak. Whenever it comes, I want to be the one who ends Goldberg's streak. And it never, thankfully, we never got it. Now, sadly, that's because they stuffed Goldberg's streak and had Nash take it. But we never got Hogan seeking the win back, which is a good thing. But that's part of the backstory of that match, is that allegedly Hogan, the only reason Hogan agreed to drop the title that night was if he was the one to take the streak down the track.
Interesting. I don't know who would have been better than either Hogan or Nash, but to break it. But we did Goldberg. We did Goldberg episode a long time ago.
We've done that. That's something else you can listen to.
Yeah, it's another one down in our archive. We have a great bunch of great episodes. Please check out the archive on our Podbean or any of your podcast catchers. We did an episode on the Goldberg streak a couple of years ago. I would definitely put it on there. All right, we need to hop ahead. We don't want to go too much longer. Just a few more matches. There's nothing else really to put. I'm not putting, because that whole thing is just an absolute sham. And you could pick. See, this is a case where it may not have been totally Hogan's fault. You could pick sides based on your tastes or what you want to believe. But we're not putting that whole Bash at the Beach 2000 mess with Hogan and Russo and Jarrett laying down for him. We're not putting that on here. That's just a mess in itself. So
and we're also not putting on the finger poke of doom. We don't need to put that on here either.
No, we don't.
That all fits into the same premise, because that's the finger poke of doom is the storyline precursor to the Bash at the Beach atrocity. So it all plays together, and we don't want that.
No, we don't want that. So I think the next match we have on here is another gimme. I think everyone knows we need to have it, and that is, of course, the big return, March 17th, 2002, Skydome, Toronto, Hulk Hogan and The Rock from WrestleMania X8. You have to have it on there. It won Match of the Year. And I remember watching it at my buddy Mike's house, and I felt like I was back in 1987, because when they locked up, first of all, the Toronto crowd was totally pro Hogan, because you know how Canada's always felt about him. So, because they're all old school. So, and then he pushed him off and he did the pose and the place went batshit. And then I legitimately thought, because I think we probably knew Rock was going to win the match. But when Hogan kicked out and did the hulking up, I turned to Dr. G, who was on one side of me on the couch, and then my other friends with it. And I'm like, guys, could they flip this? Could they actually call an audible? And I'm thinking, and then I thought, nah, probably not. Rock kind of needs the win, like Hogan got it from Andre. But for about, I'm dead serious, Dave. For about 5 seconds, I seriously thought that Hogan was gonna win, and that Vince flipped the script, called an audible, because that place was unglued at Skydome that night, unglued for Hogan coming back, his first WWF official his first WrestleMania match, obviously, since the Yokozuna thing. It wasn't his first match back, because they had some tag with Rock or maybe that was Hall and Nash against Steve and Rock. I don't think
I thought it was all three of them. No, I thought it was all three of them. I thought it was NWO versus Austin and Rock on Raw.
Oh, so it must have been a handicap. Yeah, I think you're right.
3-on-2 handicap. Yeah,
I think you're right. Which is closest we would ever get to Hogan and Austin, but that's a different story altogether. I think you have to have this match on here. I mean, it's a touchstone for that second half the the nostalgia comeback.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's an iconic match. It is just the nostalgia that it pulled. The way Hogan and Rock responded to the crowd and changed the matchup, because it's well known that there was an element where they thought it might happen, but when it did happen, both of them were a veteran enough to realize we've got to change what we planned, and Rock then acted heel for a lot of the match. Hogan did his comeback, but then they still they were able to have the Rock win, and the shaking the hands and all that. They played it perfectly, and it is just about, it might not be. Hogan at this stage of his career, obviously, it's not the greatest in-ring worker anymore. We know that. But if you want an example of perfect storytelling in a match, Hogan and The Rock at WrestleMania 18 is as close to a perfect match as you can get.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to throw in a match. I'm going to throw in a match that's also from the same year, that I think is an example of how Hogan, in this run in 2002, was willing to do business the right way. For all the criticism he had, 2002 was Hogan doing business the right way. And that's Hulk Hogan versus Kurt Angle at King of the Ring, where Hogan tapped out to the ankle lock. For the first time ever in his WWE career, he submitted. And I was shocked when that happened. I expected that Kurt would get the win, but I did not expect the way the win would occur is what would happen. And I think it's just a great example of Hogan giving back at that time to the guy who was the best in-ring worker in the company.
I'm surprised. That's a surprising match. It's very good, and yes, Kurt went over, and that was great. And I remember they had a match in Montreal. I think it was SmackDown, and the pop was off the charts. I think it was after this match. But yeah, no, that match at King of the Ring 02, it probably helps the fact that the rest of that card is kind of Triple H and Taker is not good. It's not a good match. It's actually pretty awful. So this was kind of a good highlight. And Brock winning the tournament was good. I wish they had done a more full tournament, but I have no problem with this. No, it's a good pick. And again, it put over a guy that he was putting over a great worker in Kurt, and who was established, and the company needed to be needed over, and Hogan did do the right thing. He did get his title run for a month. That I was going to put that match on here, but I'm not going to do that. It's a match. The match is okay. Yeah, it's not good, and we already know. Winning the title one more time is just another thing for him. There's no need to put that on there. So, no, I like that pick. I like that pick, Dave. I like it a lot because, again, it's the best match on that card, and it was an example of how Hogan was getting to the point where it was time to do things the right way. So I agree with you on that. I absolutely love this next match. It has to be on here because I don't think anybody expected this match to be anywhere near as good as it was. And it actually added to what was already becoming an amazing show out of nowhere. And I have to put Hulk Hogan, Vince McMahon, street fight from WrestleMania 19. I love that match. And for a match that already was really good to that point, and we still had gotten this match, or Rock and Austin, or of course the main event, Kurt and Brock. It was just so insane how good they beat the crap out of each other. And all the blood and everything. And I'm sure Vince is like, yeah, well, we get, I run this company. So if we're going to have blood, I'm going to have blood. And Hogan ended up being a good gigger in the back end of his career. Because he was never a good bleeder early on, I feel like. We didn't get a lot of good bloody Hogans in the 80s, but he really bled here. And it's just a good, violent match. The whole who invented Hulkamania, the match everybody wanted after years and years with, the 80s and then steroid trial and all that stuff. I think the backstory was good. And it just ended up being a better match than anybody gave it credit for that it became. And I think it's in the annals of one of Hogan's better, well-worked matches, believe it or not, for two guys that are in their 60s at that point. Late 60s or late 50s, I guess, maybe early 60s.
Yeah, I think you said it's the last great match of his career. It came out of nowhere. It had no right to be as good as it was, but I think it's an example of two men knowing their limitations, working within their limitations to tell the story of the match, and it worked. It came together and it worked, and it's an enjoyable match. It's a surprisingly enjoyable match, and I think it surprised everyone that it was as good as it was. So, totally agree that this needs to be on the card. You can't not include that. And as I said, it really is. It's the culmination of his career. You're tying it all together. Hogan, Vince, the whole who he was, who he became, coming back to the company. And yeah, it just summarizes it all together in this one match.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was pretty much his last great match. Let's be honest. I don't think he did anything after this was any good. I have a feeling we probably have one match left, Dave, and I have a feeling I know what match you're going to put on here. But go ahead.
I actually have two, but they all fall into the same category. Like I said, this is essentially where you would want the DVD to end. Hogan and Vince, there's your end. What a great moment that would be. But unfortunately, the legacy of Hulk Hogan doesn't end there. The legacy of Hulk Hogan, I think, can be epitomized in two more matches. And the first one, as we've probably talked about this before, is the Hulk Hogan Shawn Michaels match from SummerSlam. That is just it's an example of Hogan. Number one, it's an example of Hogan coming back when he probably shouldn't have. He was past his prime. They held on too long. Then it's an example of Hogan using his political power when he shouldn't have. A part-time guy, a one-off occasion, taking down one of the greatest workers in the history of the business who was still full-time at that moment. It should never have happened. And Shawn, the match is memorable because of what Shawn does. Shawn gets his revenge in the match by overselling and making a mockery of Hogan's offense. But it tells the story of who they are. And as sad as it is a reflection of that legacy. You held on too long, Hulk, and when you did make these little comebacks, you wanted to win when you probably shouldn't. You've done all that great work in 2002 of putting guys over and doing the right thing for business, and then he comes back and ruins that whole image.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The backstory was that they were supposed to have a trilogy. Hogan was supposed to win the first. Shawn was supposed to win the second. And then they were going to figure out something for the third or not have one at all. And then, of course, Hogan says, no, we're only going to wrestle one and I'm just going to win. And because I'm the baby face and I'm supposed to win. And Shawn's like, oh, well, okay. Then I'm going to make the most fun. I'm going to enjoy myself as much as I possibly can. And he pretty much did. Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like I understand that people thought Hogan and Shawn, you have the two different eras of the business, the 80s and the 90s. But if that's the way it was going to be, I was happy never saying it. To be honest, that's fine. But yes, it needs to go on our DVD because again, it's another example of Hogan probably dipping his toe too deep into the pool and probably should have just stayed away, or Vince should have just not. He came back. He got into the Hall of Fame earlier that year. He did the run in the skit at WrestleMania 21, taking out Muhammad Hassan. That was good enough. I don't think we needed him and Shawn as a tag team, and all that stuff. And then Shawn turns on him, and I don't think we needed all that crap. I don't think we needed any of it. I think we would have been perfectly happy with Hogan going into the Hall of Fame that year. Maybe he comes out with Piper and Carlito or something and Stone Cold. Maybe that would have been fun, along with the Muhammad Hassan stuff. And then that's it. And then Hogan goes off into the sunset and we're good. Excuse me. I don't think we really needed a feud with Shawn and all this other stuff if this is the way it was going to end. So,
absolutely.
And I don't have anything else. I don't really have anything else. Right. I'm done with mine, but you said you have one more.
I have one more. And this is, we just talked about holding on too long. And I only want to put this on the DVD as an example of holding on too long and how holding on too long can tarnish an image. I was not at this match, thankfully, but I could have been.
Oh, I know what you're about to talk about. Oh my God!
Because
you really want to do this? You really want to do this?
What must be the epitome of poor decision making?
Oh no!
Hulk Hogan made another comeback.
Oh no!
And on a tour of Australia, he faced Ric Flair in what were some of the worst matches in the history of the business.
Oh my God!
Even if it's just a little highlights package. The Hulkamania tour of Australia in I think it was 2009, I think it was,
or 10,
was
because it was after Flair's, it was after the retirement match at WrestleMania 24. Yes. So
yeah, I think it was 2010. Look, they filmed it. Thankfully, they never released it on. They were going to release a video due to issues with the company and the businesses they were working with in Australia. They never released it on DVD, but the footage is there, and we're going to dig it up for the mere fact that this match that Hogan and Flair should never have entered the ring again. You could have done something from TNA, but thankfully Hogan never actually. I don't believe actually had a match in TNA. Flair did, but Hogan didn't.
I feel like he might have had one when he was with that whole stretch in 2011, but I don't think we have to talk about that. I think again, that was more,
But to me, unfortunately, I felt the one thing that Hogan and with him Flair just couldn't realize is their time was done. They'd hit the point where they shouldn't enter a ring. And whereas Hogan managed to get the match against The Rock, the match against Vince, and even the match against Shawn, Hogan was just able to make it work.
Right.
The Hulkamania tour of Australia in 2010, it was an example of no, you should have stayed retired. You should never have come out of retirement. Maybe this is a Blu-ray extra. Maybe this is a Blu-ray extra on our legacy
special feature. Yes. Yep.
Special feature, because it was that, from all accounts, it was that bad. I did have a couple of friends who were there, and they said it was awful, and they honestly wish they hadn't gone. It was that bad.
Oh God, yeah, dreadful. I agree with you. I don't even have anything else to say. That's just dreadful. We went. I mean, yeah, but we'll put it there as a final montage of saying goodbye the wrong way.
Yes.
So there you go, folks. That we have. Let's see. Oh God, 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 3, 24, 25, 26 matches. And then the montage from 2010. We're not even going to count that as a match. I think it's a good snapshot of his career, for better and unfortunately, yes, a few for worse. I won't read them all, but I think we did a good snapshot of. I think we had a good snapshot of his career, top to bottom, for better or for worse. What do you think?
Absolutely. This is who he was. This encapsulates his career. These matches we've talked about encapsulate the good and the bad of his career. They highlight who he was as a worker, what he brought to the ring. There's outside the ring elements that play into it. There's the roles he played in Hollywood play into it. It all plays in together to give us this image of who Hogan was. And I think it really encapsulates just how broad that career was, how many great people he faced up against over his career, which I guess lays the question, who did we miss? Like, who missed out? When you look at Hogan's career and who were his contemporaries, so obviously, to me, there's two key matches that I can think of that we never got. Okay. One of them's from very early in his career. We never got Hogan versus Bruno Sammartino when Hogan was a heel in that late 70s, early 80s run.
Yep.
You never got the Bruno match, which would have been interesting to see what might have happened there.
I agree.
And I think at the time Bruno would have won. I think it would have been a typical WWF thing at the time. Hogan just would have been the next challenger. Classy Freddie would have probably come out. They would have challenged Bruno or talked smack about him on an interview. Bruno would have stood up for himself, and I'm the man. And they would have met at MSG, and they probably would have met once. And Bruno wins by DQ, and then they meet in the rematch, and Bruno pins him. Because that's the story of Bruno. Yep. So that's the one. That's one. The other match we never really got was Hogan Bret Hart, and to me, that's a one key glaring thing that we never got. The storyline encapsulating Yokozuna in '93 obviously highlights the fact that part of the underlying element of the story was Vince had allegedly told Bret that he was going to wrestle Hogan at SummerSlam and win the title back from Hogan at SummerSlam. Hogan disputes this. Where's the truth? Look, it's Hogan and it's Vince. Who knows where the truth lay? But there is that story and the belief that they were going to wrestle each other. But to me, you're not really have got it there, but when Bret arrives in WCW at the end of '97, I mean, can you imagine Hogan Sting's cleaned us? Let's rebook this for a moment. It's taken out. He's our referee. Then Sting starts his comeback and Bret makes his way out. He was the referee earlier in the night. He makes his way out. Sting drops Hogan with the Scorpion Death Drop. Bret enters the ring and he counts a 3 count. Clean, slow, normal, everything. Sting is crowned champion. And Hogan's response on Nitro, Sting didn't beat me. Bret Hart, you cost me that match. You came in, you weren't the assigned referee. You've cost me the match, and I want you in the ring. And Bret Hart's first match in WCW could have been sold out against Hulk Hogan, and you could have had Bret go over. But can you imagine just that basic, how easy that storyline is to create?
And it might have actually saved the Starrcade '97 debacle in a roundabout way as well. Obviously, the one thing that I always said is I wanted. I know we did eventually get Hogan Flair, but I obviously, and I've said this many times throughout my years of doing podcasts, and I've done it in written form too. Is I always wanted to see Hogan and Flair at WrestleMania 8 because that's where they belonged. But it did end up happening, so I can't really count that.
And we booked that. Yeah.
Right, we did.
Yeah, we did. We did that in our alternate universe in another
Yes.
episode. So
we did it.
That's
we
one
did. We did
had
do
looked
it
at before.
We did.
So,
Yeah, we did. So we don't have to get into that now. Let me think.
another potential match we missed out on. I've got another one we potentially missed out on. Hogan and Jake in
I was just thinking of that. I was actually just thinking
late
that.
'86.
Yeah, I was
just that they teased it. They were going to do it, and the story is that the fans were responding to Jake, and they nixed. They did 3 matches, and then they nixed it. We never got a Hogan Jake feud. That could have been very interesting. Because I think Jake brings a different of all the opponents Hogan had. It was always about were they a bigger man or a stronger man or a more evil man.
Right.
But Jake brought a ring psychology that Hogan never really faced. And it would have been interesting to see how they developed that story and let Jake get into Hogan's mind. And then obviously Hogan would overcome, so he would need to be victorious at the end. But I think it would have been an interesting story to see play out.
Yep. And then the one that I have, and I'm wondering, obviously there was politics of that as well. Probably is we never got to see Hogan in Austin, because you had probably the two. If there was ever a 2-headed Mount Rushmore, some say they're the two, but obviously that's that's based on opinion.
Yeah.
I feel like if Hogan got cheered at WrestleMania 18 against Austin, I think to Rock's credit, I think Austin would have got rattled, because I think he would have expected to be the only babyface, and Hogan would never have got cheered. I don't know if that would have been the case, but I feel like Austin would not have reacted to it as good as Rock did. I will give Rock credit for that. So,
and that's an interesting thing about the nostalgia element, because there was the nostalgia element for cheering Hogan. But if Austin had been in that match, Austin was so over and so he was just so much bigger than and look, Rock was big, but I think everyone underestimates just how much Austin was bigger than the business at that time.
Right.
I honestly wonder whether Hogan would have been cheered. I wonder if the crowd would have stayed with the story element, which is Austin is our guy. Austin had been. He was the face of the Attitude Era. And he was the face of that, especially if you keep the element of the story that that McMahon brought Hogan in. He brought the NWO in to kill the WWE, to inject the poison.
Right,
if you keep that element, then you keep it tied to Vince as well. I think Hogan gets booed.
Oh, you're probably right. Yeah, you're probably right. I don't feel like people were as loyal to Rock at that stretch as they were to Austin. You make a good point.
Because you also had the element where The Rock had just started leaving to go to Hollywood. He'd left and gone to Hollywood. He'd come back. This was after he filmed Scorpion King. And he's come back, and then he leaves again. Like, people know he's not with us full time anymore. And that was starting to play in the minds of the fans. Whereas Austin, they knew we don't know how much longer we're going to get to have Austin around, because we know that neck is playing up, and he could be gone at any time.
That is true. That is true. I don't think I have any other guys. I think that was it. I think Hogan Bruno in the early 80s would have been a big deal.
Yeah. I've got one to throw out there, only because he spent Hogan's time in WCW. Another missed opportunity could have been potentially bringing in Great Muta at his peak and having Hogan face Muta in WCW.
Oh, huh. Interesting.
I don't think it would have been as big of a draw, but in terms of like Muta, there's a role that Muta played in Japan and the crossover between Japan and the US. He was a big name from a non-Japanese fan point. Like he was probably the biggest Japanese name in the 90s, was the Great Muta. And I think a match between Muta and Hogan would have been an interesting battle.
Yes. And I think Hogan would have hung. I think Hogan would have hung around with him. I think Hogan would have known to adapt. And I think Muta would also have adjusted, you maybe amped down amped down the meter to kind of meet Hogan halfway. And I think it would have been a good match. I really do. I think it would have been a good match. I think they would have done a good job of telling a great story, however they would have told it, and push the limit.
Think about this for a finish. I mean, and we're obviously talking about Hogan probably late 94, 95. You've got to have it when he's still the babyface. But Muta comes in at the peak of his powers. They wrestle this match, and then the ref goes down. Muta sprays the mist in Hogan's face, and Hogan is blinded. And Muta maybe beats him down while he's blinded, drops the moonsault on him. Hogan, the referee can count one, really slow two. Hogan kicks out and is hulking up while blinded by the mist. And I'm just picturing it. Hogan basically just grabs him and does the three punches without letting go, whips him into the thing, feels the boot, and then you could just sort of see him doing it blindfold. He just knows exactly where he is in the ring, bounces off the ropes, drops the leg. But he does it all with the idea that he's been blinded. I think it would be a Hogan-esque style victory.
Yeah, true. Meanwhile, he's got all the stuff on his face. Yeah, that is pretty great. Yeah, I think that's pretty funny. I agree with you on that. Well, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this tribute to, again, arguably, maybe unarguably, in my opinion, the greatest sports entertainer that ever lived. Had his hiccups in terms of, he had his hiccups in terms of creatively. Might have led to some funny moments. Say what you want about SummerSlam 2005, but it is entertaining to watch. We hope you enjoyed it. Find out, search these matches out, the ones that are maybe a little less conspicuous. I highly recommend that Morocco one from 85. I agree with Dave on the Memphis one from 79. If you could find that one somewhere, highly recommend it as well. Dave, any final thoughts on the icon Sting? No, not that one. We already talked about him. Your final thoughts on the legacy of Hulk Hogan.
I think, sadly, I think Hogan his legacy's been tarnished in recent years by out of the ring personal stuff, comments he made, interviews he did, things that tarnished his reputation, his legacy. And I think it's sad that had he had another couple of years, we knew he was dealing with some health issues. Had he recovered and had a couple of years to probably go around and talk his way out of it, as in, give interviews that, he publicly apologizes. I've said some things in the past I didn't mean, but I see things differently now, and I hope people can, if he showed a bit of remorse and a bit of humility, I think people would be more willing to accept it. And unfortunately, those things have tarnished a little bit. But what you can't tarnish is what he did in the ring and what he did for the business. And if you can separate the two, you've got this career of a guy who transformed the wrestling business that we all love and enjoy today. And without him, I don't think any of us would be fans. And that to me is the legacy of Hulk Hogan.
I agree with you. I will say this. If I ever do see Bubba the Love Sponge in person, I will beat the fucking shit out of him. Thanks for ruining things for all of us, you fucking asshole. Secondly, I'd like to just remember him for I want to remember him for what he did for me as a kid, and how he made me the wrestling fan that I am today. I want to leave it at that. And however anybody else thinks about anything is totally up to them. But
the lasting image of Hogan should be slamming Andre at WrestleMania 3 and posing in front of that crowd. That is what Hogan's wrestling career can be completely summed up in one moment. That's the moment.
Yep, I agree. Absolutely. Dave, thank you. That was fun. One of our more fun journeys. We'll be back next month. We'll go back to our regularly scheduled programming, if you will.
That's right. We will be going back.
Yeah, we'll be going back. So join us in September. We will return to our alternate universe rebooking of WWE 2003, where we will rebook Backlash, Judgment Day, and the first brand-only show when Raw had Bad Blood. So we're going to take care of that for you in September. Dave, always a pleasure. You can always find him around the Place to Be Facebook page. You can find him on Facebook Messenger, too. You can find me. You know where I am. I'm everywhere. Follow all of our great feeds, PTB Wrestling Network, the Pop Experience, the No-So with the Jenny Position, the Backbone. We all have a lot of fun. Check all our stuff on YouTube as well. For Dave, I'm Scott. We hope you enjoyed the legacy of one of the greatest of all time, and we will see you in September through the Looking Glass.